What's up, everybody? My name is Chris Enriquez. You already know that, though, because you're watching my Instagram channel at Chris Enriquez Drums. Couple plugs. I work for Revolver Magazine. I play drums in the band Spotlights. I play guitar in the band Total Meltdown. And I host the show that you're watching right now, Age of Quarantine, that usually takes place Monday through Friday, 8 o'clock Eastern Standard Time on the St. Vitus Instagram channel. Making some changes. This is the last episode on my personal channel at 8 o'clock Eastern Standard. Starting tomorrow, we're going to be doing interviews at 3 o'clock on the weekends, Eastern Standard Time, with folks from Europe and people in different time zones. So Saturdays and Sundays at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we'll be doing interviews with a couple different people from other countries. Tomorrow, at St. Vitus Bar, Artie Shepard, my co-host, will be speaking with Frank Turner. And then we'll move on to our regular program Monday through Friday. Okay, that being said, you hear Silent Majority in the background. I'm just going to get into it. Silent Majority is the greatest Long Island hardcore band of all time. Ben Van Dyke is the greatest Long Island hardcore drummer of all time. They're just the best. No one will ever be better. The fucking classic. I'll go through my quick intro and I'm going to get Ben on the screen. Ben Van Dyke was the drummer of Silent Majority, an underground band that existed throughout the 90s into the early 2000s. He's done a few reunions, mainly benefits. They are the band from Long Island that was the soundtrack to my youth and many others. God, man, they were so original. They took Lifetime and Avail and 7 Seconds and Sunny Day Real Estate and they blended it perfectly into their own sound. Other bands like them, like Clockwise, Mind Over Matter, and Inside did a great job, but Silent Majority took it to the next level. Their sound would later influence Taking Back Sunday, Brand New, Movie Life, and Glassjaw, who went and took it to a more mainstream level. They were also the first band to accept my band into the scene On the Might of Princes. Some of my bandmates lived with members of Silent Majority, and we played shows with them earlier on, and they were a very intimidating band, so when they accepted us, it was not something that we took lightly. Certainly not someone like myself at 18, 19 years old. Their lyrics still resonate with me and my friends, and years later, after the band's demise, I became friends with my guest Ben, and I'm so excited to have him here tonight. So, that being said, I'm going to shut the fuck up, and I'm going to get him. Let's give him a second there. Thanks to everybody for tuning in, by the way, and spending your Saturday night with me. It means a lot. Ben!
What's up, brother?
What's up, man? How you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm chilling, man. Is that the drum set behind you? I love that.
Yes, it is. This is my music room.
Nice. We got the man cave. Dude,
Nice.
how have you been managing to get through the pandemic?
I have to say I feel very fortunate. I recognize that this can take so many different forms for different people, and of the spectrum of challenge that this could be, I feel like my life is very, steady right now. So very pleased about that. Pleased, with the opportunity to reflect more on life and connect with family and spend time, just being creative and spend with my time with my family. So I'm just trying my best to stay positive, see the silver lining in things, and be there for those who this is more challenging for.
I'm glad to hear that you're taking the time to stay positive and spend time with your loved ones, man. It's fucking nuts. And one thing I like about this is it's been a way to reconnect with old friends. And I've made some new ones, too, because I've interviewed some people I've never met in my life. So I want to thank you for taking the time to chat with me, man.
Absolutely.
So I've been using this opportunity to really get to know people, especially if we have an audience. And I'm taking people back to their beginnings. Let's start with this. Where are you originally from, and where are you right now?
So I am originally from Long Island, a little town called Seacliff. It's on the north shore of Long Island. Quiet little town, and I currently live in Chicago.
Okay, I love Chicago, man. It's got so much in common with New York, but also it's got its own character, right? So it's like it's got the big city, but Long Island is a special place. I live in Bed-Stuy now, and my life in Long Island 20 years ago seems so foreign at this point, but I always try to go back, and obviously have a lot of memories from there that I want to talk to you about. What are your earliest memories of discovering music before you started playing in bands or going to shows?
Well, I would say from an early age, I always loved music. I was always turned on by listening to music. I was very fortunate to have family and parents who really nurtured my musical talent. And there's this story of me being a little kid and having this blue Smurf guitar, and I would get up in front of people and perform. And I can already tell from those stories that, I was just loving communicating through music and having an audience and using music as a platform for expression. So I started playing piano as a young kid. I played in the school band, playing clarinet. I was kind of just finding my way to, the instrument that I felt like would really, really capture my voice. And I just remember in the school band always looking back at the drummers and just thinking, that looks like so much fun. So yeah, and I just seemed to feel like, a natural inclination to it. And I actually had a close friend who had a drum set, and I would go over to his house, and every once in a while I would, play his kit. And I remember one day opening the hi-hat, and he's like, "You're not supposed to do that." I was like, "What do you mean you're not supposed to do that?" And I was already experimenting with things and trying things just through intuition. And it just felt like a natural thing that I loved from the instant I did. I just got an immediate ecstatic feeling the first time I played drums.
Did it come natural to you, or were you given some help from teachers, or like you mentioned, a friend that had a drum set? How did you get down and dirty and figure it all out?
Well, I think it was a combination. I think a lot of it was listening, and I think it's really important to take note of the people in our lives who pass music down to us. I mean, the amount of different interviews I listen to with musicians I respect, and they talk about an older sister, a cousin, some person down the block that passed records on to them. And for me, in many ways, that was my older brother. We shared a bedroom for a lot of my youth, and he was 4 years older than me. And I can just recall hearing from my bedroom while I was trying to go to sleep. We had two connected rooms, so he'd be hanging out till late hours listening to all this music, and I'd hear Ministry and Jane's Addiction and Bad Brains and all these different bands. And the bands that at one time sort of scared me and intimidated me, slowly I was humming those songs, or I was like, let me hear that again, and it started to really turn me on. And he had a zine that he wrote. He used to go to shows at the Angle back in the day, so he kind of led the way in kind of tuning my ear. And a lot of my playing just came from trying to replicate the stuff that my favorite drummers did, along with having a teacher. So I had on and off stints with a private teacher. I had a time where I would tech for his band, and he would give me lessons for that. And just trying to put a little bit of technique and a little bit of learning into just pure, intuition,
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that probably is the case for a lot of people that play drums in the underground music scene where we came from, is that sort of natural intuition, because you have the culture that we were around. There were no rules. You could kind of do your own thing, and as long as you were doing a half good job and found decent players, people supported you. But your playing was always really interesting to me. It was a little outside of the box. You mentioned having a brother that got you into you mentioned Jane's Addiction, Ministry, Bad Brains. Mm-hmm. What were the bands that you really gravitated to when you started kind of coming into your own individualism?
It started, I feel like, with Twisted Sister in first grade.
Very Long Island.
Duran, yeah, right. Then Jane's Addiction, Metallica, and then kind of when a lot of the alternative boom happened, I was really primed for that. And again, it was a friend's cousin that lived in DC that was passing on Fugazi records and Shudder to Think records. And so that was a lot of my high school. I mean, just obsessed with bands from DC and Chicago, and in many ways, that's what made moving to Chicago an appealing, thought. The fact that for so long I'd listened to bands and labels that I respected from here, that I was like, this is another great musical community. Let's see if I can, dip my toes in there.
That's so amazing to me, because I feel like back then, you would start out metal, or you would start out punk or hardcore, and then sort of like move into things. It sounds like from the get-go, maybe through your brother and your cousin, as you mentioned, like you just got exposed to really cool music right off the bat, like really cool, diverse stuff, Shudder to Think and Jawbox and Forgotten. That's really interesting to me. And again, it really shows in your playing. What were the drummers, whether it was early on or, around the time that you were starting to get active, that you were kind of emulating or inspired?
It's funny because my wife always pokes fun at me about, she's like, oh, you always say everyone's your favorite drummer. And at different points in my life, I had different people that just became that person that was kind of like my lighthouse, or that person, like that touchstone that kind of led the way for me, or pushed me into new directions. And Matt Cameron was one of those like early ones from Soundgarden when I was, real young. He just was everything to me.
So good.
John Bonham, of course. Just Zach, of course, from Jawbox. I mean, so much of the Silent Majority is influenced in me trying to do my interpretation of what he did. I'm kind of blanking, but there's so, and just even around the local scene, I saw a picture posted today of Dead Guy show that I was at, and the Lifetime drummer, just really like standout drummers in the scene that, like, when you would go, you were just like, this is so amazing that I can stand this close to this person, have conversations with this person, meet this person,
Yeah. The Zach from Jawbox thing is cool, and I can hear that. I can tell you, man, like, as a fan back then, and just to anybody watching, like, when somebody's like a teenager and then someone's 20 years old at the time, it's like a big, now it's like, if you're 30 or 35 or 30, 40, you're just an adult, right? But my friends and I, and a lot of people I met at Silent Majority shows, we would watch you in particular play. It was so outside of the box. We're like, this guy's not playing like he's in Sick of It All or just like any other hardcore band. You had your own thing going on. And anyway, yeah, that's not really a question. It's more of an observation. Were you ever kind of a straight punk or hardcore kid at any point, or you were always more on the out of the box tip?
Well, I mean, I really love all music, and so like the Minor Threats, the things like that always appealed to me as well. I definitely had a period where like a sort of, I'll only listen to things on independent labels. I only want things to be punk, and it was actually Silent Majority that really opened my mind. It was being in the van with a very diverse group of people and a CD player for hours on end, and people taking turns putting things in, that really opened my mind to like, why am I being so, fixated on just this one thing and so closed-minded when there's so much out there. And that manifested in things like, 4 o'clock in the morning drives, listening to Portishead or De La Soul or, just all genres. And, it just eventually, my mind was just completely open to, it doesn't matter if it's the simplest beat or the most complex beat. It doesn't matter if it's real drums, fake drums. It's just all about a feeling and a vibe and just connecting. And if it connects with you, that's beautiful.
Yeah, obviously want to get into Silent Majority and how all that came together. Like you said, Silent Majority opened up so many doors for people because it was so diverse, and you could tell that everyone was into different types of music. And hearing you talk about it provides more clarity to that. Let's talk right before we get into Silent Majority. When did you discover local bands and scene? What were the venues? What were the bands? How did that happen for you?
I love being able to answer that question because, I mean, just in so many ways, that moment and that all happening formed who I am for the rest of my life. And if that didn't happen, I very much wouldn't be who I am. And today, I don't necessarily surround myself with a lot of people who had that same experience or went through the same thing. So it's hard to really relate this to people. That's why I love conversations with people like you. I feel like, oh my God, like someone that can relate to this or has been there and done this. And I was very fortunate. I went to a Battle of the Bands meeting in ninth grade. And I had a couple friends. We had a band called Simpleton. We were trying to you know, play music and interpret the Dead Kennedys and bands like that and play in that sort of style. And that included Ariel Telford, who eventually became the bassist of Glassjaw, and one of my best friends, Bob Heikhaus, and my friend Rob Bound. At the time, Rob was not in the band. He was 2 years older than us. And we saw him, and like you were saying before, those kind of age gaps at that age were gigantic. And he actually could drive at that point. And at some point or another, we just said, you know, do you want to be the singer of our band? Everyone called him like Rob Grunge. He had like his finger on the pulse of everything that was going on in Seattle. And he introduced me to the idea of going to the city and buying 7-inch records and all this kind of stuff. So he had a best friend who he went to camp with, summer camp, named Mike Caruana, the bassist of the Warped Weeb Wobbles, who lived down in Merrick. And eventually we met them, and we would go on these weekend trips down there. Our friend Rob would drive to play handball, to play soccer, and that would be with the kids from VOD, that would be with the kids from all different other bands. So we started kind of networking through that. And one of the big moments in all that was the drummer, Mike Rubin. His parents would go away all the time and leave this amazing house about 8 minutes from where I grew up empty, and that whole part of the hardcore scene would descend on that house, and you would have everyone from different bands jamming at once. You'd have VOD jamming with Silent Majority, jamming with all these different members on a different instrument. And through that, I got to know Tommy, I got to know Rich, I got to know Ryan, I got to know all these different people. And then there was a couple of Warped Weeb Wobble shows where they had me sit in on drums. So just through that, I started, you know, networking and meeting people. And the next thing I know, you know, I'm at a show at the Huntington Y, and Silent Majority had just lost their drummer. And in my recollection, I got kind of cornered by them, and especially Tommy was just like, will you go on the road? Will you go on tour? Will you record? And I was like, I guess so. This sounds cool. Let's do this. And yeah, so without much hesitation, became the drummer of Silent Majority. And that from then on, I was trying to put my fingerprint on this band that I could see from the first time I saw them to right around when I joined, advancing so quickly and getting so amazing so fast. And I was loving some of the beats that Steve was writing, Tommy's brother, toward the very end, and just was like, I can take this, and I feel like I can push this even further and make this my own. And that's what I tried to do.
You definitely did, because I remember getting I think you were in the band already at the point that I discovered it. But I think it was like the first 7-inch that you were on was the first time I got into you guys with KM and why am I blanking? You know what I'm talking about.
Prefix and Recognize.
Recognize, and then I would see you play live doing Expectations and the stuff from the demo, and you turned it into your own thing. You played it in your own style, which is dope, and also just really important, I think, when you're trying to kind of prove yourself and walk into a situation, you know what I mean? You got to sort of make it your own. And I found that very inspiring. So in terms of like the band, did you guys have like a goal, or was it just kind of like, we're underground, we're a hardcore band or whatever, we're just going to have fun? Like, was there ever any like a professional goal ever at any point, or did that never enter your mind?
I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is that I don't feel like we were the kind of band that like was super business savvy and super like had some big plan or anything like that. I think each of us as individuals maybe had dreams and ideas and maybe kind of shared them amongst the band, but I don't think they were all necessarily the same. And I think as a whole, there was a lot of just wrestling with the whole independent label versus major label, and you know, how can one sustain themselves as an artist or a musician long term, and how can you have the most creative, you know, beautiful, productive work if you have to spend your day doing something totally different and try to eke it out at the end of every day. So it became like, I want to be able to do this all day, every day, all the time. And it started to seem like, well, maybe the answer is a major label. And you saw some bands successfully doing that. In hindsight, you hear the interviews with a lot of these people, and I'm like, it doesn't seem like it really, worked out.
It's true.
For the best. So they always make it look so much better than it is. But yeah, there is this perfect level of sustainability, and yeah, that would have been a beautiful place to be.
I'm jumping around a little bit here because I do want to go back to the other days before we move forward to other stuff. But I'm just kind of riffing. Like, did you guys ever get approached by big labels while you were around, or major labels or anything like that, or was that not really?
I mean, my recollection is not particularly. Yeah, definitely some independent label interest, but for us, Rec Age Records at that time and then Exit, which we were sort of on a subsidiary of that, was, so many of our heroes and people who we loved were on that label. So that was huge for us, and Initial Records as well. I mean, there were so many bands on Initial that I was like just honored to be grouped with. So and Louisville held this special place in my heart because a lot of bands came from there. So even just the idea that I was on a label from that town and could go back there somewhat regularly was exciting.
Yeah, they have a great scene. I know you guys played a lot with those bands, and you would play the Crazy Fest and stuff. Well, let's talk about the music though of Silent Majority. What was the writing process like? I mean, you had Rich, who kind of played this more straightforward punk rock, melodic punk rock style, and then Ryan was like almost jazzy. There was so much going on. Like, what was it like when you were putting songs together for Life of a Spectator? Let's go there.
Well, it's funny because we did have our own, like, sort of, each of us had our own individual, like, musical, like, superpower, you know what I mean? And, like, yeah, so you're right. Like, Rich had, like, the more, like, punk rock kind of, he'd had a lot of, like, the more chugga kind of stuff, and Ryan had the more melodic, picking, complex, intricate kind of stuff. The writing process, that record, it was being written over a long period of time, and it also had the opportunity to be played live a lot and evolve as a piece before it ever got in the studio. There was a couple of songs that we wrote like last minute that were barely played live, like Nodos was barely played live. I feel like Taming was barely played live before that came out, but a lot of those other songs were played a ton. So we were able to workshop them live, get them to the point that, feed off the audience, all those kind of things that I think in some ways makes a song better. Often I recall the writing process was either starting with a drum beat and there was some sort of like, we were just jamming on that, or Ryan brought in a lot of riffs. And he would be a lot of the foundation of the main part of the song, and then we would sit there and kind of workshop and structure it together, and then and Rich always had like the most amazing like little accompanying parts to go on top of it, and then Tommy would lay it down on top. But like, for example, the EP You Would Love to Know, a lot of those vocals we didn't even hear until we got into the studio. Like, Tommy would come late night after work, after we'd had a whole day of tracking instruments, and he would come in and we would be hearing some of those lyrics for the first time. So that made those songs very different, I think, just because the way they had either been played and internalized for a longer period of time or not.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much that I can say about the band. Basically, Tommy's lyrics, the way that he delivered them, it's like, man, it just stood the test of time. It still resonates with me and a lot of people. Like I was saying during the intro, like there's never been one like him, in my opinion. He's like this like hidden gem, and I don't even know the words to describe someone. The way that he sang and delivered and could tell a story that was relatable to everybody, it was just like the perfect thing at the perfect time. And anybody that wasn't there, I feel bad for because it was really special. It still is. It
was, and I think I was lucky to have the opportunity to see it as a fan first, and I I could see that magic before I was ever in the band. And he, I just remember there was just this quality he had that was so different than any of the other singers. This sort of like hip hop kind of cadence, this like more melody, lyrics that were like very personal. Yeah, it was amazing.
He's like a storyteller, you know, like Bob Dylan or something, like a hardcore Bob Dylan. But yeah, like in his vocals, I heard obviously a little Bono. There was a rasp to it. You guys, to me, like it was just so much going on, and it worked so well. And let me ask you this, like a silly Long Island scene rumor that I heard back in the day. Is it true that Rich taught Ryan how to play guitar and was his babysitter, and then Ryan got eventually like learned how to play more elaborate stuff on his own? That's like a rumor passed down from.
I'm not sure about that, actually. I feel like I would have known that, but I think Ryan may be on here, so maybe you can answer that for us.
Okay, I don't know where I heard that from. Long Island is a weird thing.
I like that, but it does say, I mean, the rumor itself does say something about the fact that the core of the group and the way the group started was a very close-knit group of kids that grew up together, you know, and had very close relationships, and yeah, so yeah, that wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah, well, and then early on was Rich more the guy that would lay the foundation, and then more towards Life of a Spectator into the EP. It was more like Ryan kind of laying out the foundation, or was it kind of was it just all over the place and not really that way?
I mean, specific songs, you know, may have had, you know, different origins, but much of it originated, you know, with I believe ideas that Ryan was, you know, coming up with. But I do have to say that a lot of You Would Love to Know also, which very much affected the sound of that record, was written by Ryan and myself at college separately. And we came back with those songs pretty much fully fleshed out as instrumentals, and then just kind of filled in the other parts, you know?
Yeah. You could really hear at that point that you're starting to expand your horizons, your musical horizons and tastes, and there's some different things going on. Drum-wise, especially, it took me years to figure out. I didn't know you back then. We started talking a lot more after the band broke up, but it took me years to figure out some of the shit that you were doing on there. It's like, God damn. Yeah, let me go back to the Life of a Spectator record, though. What are some of your fondest memories of making that? I've heard a lot from touring with Artie Shepherd, my band, Primitive Weapons, because I know he produced it, and he's told me a lot of funny stories. What are your fondest memories for making that record?
Oh, I mean, see, the fond memories, I feel like, are more few and far between, because I think it was a lot more about just being nervous and trying to do a good job. And I was so young and so inexperienced, and the studio was such a new thing that I was like I was so excited to record with Artie, but that was also a bit intimidating. We have a long running, we have a constant conversation. Oh, Ryan is saying it's true.
Hold on. So it's true. Ryan from Solid Road says it's true. Rich was his babysitter, and he did. All right, so that was true. Somebody told me that. I'm glad it's true. It's really fucking weird. Amazing.
That's hilarious. Yeah, so, one of the things that Artie and I always reflect on is the fact that he convinced me to use a click track. And I had never played to a click track. I didn't know if it was a good idea or not. There was certainly a little bit of like a learning curve involved. So that was interesting. And him just, you know, trying to produce a bit and be like, oh, like, be simpler, don't be so complicated. He has always been my inspiration for like, wow, maybe I shouldn't be so complicated, or maybe I should tone it down a little bit. And he was always the person like, dude, you're too crazy. Just like tone, you know, so. But yeah, it was an incredible experience. It was an amazing learning experience. I felt so blessed to be in that position. I mean, in life, I have achieved some of my musical dreams like 20 times over, and that was one of them, just to even be in a recording studio. And there was random stories of like, we needed to borrow an amp, and Ryan and Artie went to like Shudder to Think's practice space, and we're like talking with Shudder to Think, one of my favorite bands at the time. And I think we borrowed some equipment from Walter, from Quicksand, like people that just seemed in another universe. It felt like we were kind of getting a little close to, so.
You recorded that in Manhattan too.
Yeah, it was a place I believe called Spaceship Studios. And it was actually recorded by a guy named Ray Martin. He did quite a bit of it as well. But Artie was basically, had his hands on most of the controls and.
Yeah, and that's Artie Shepherd from Mind Over Matter. For anyone watching that isn't from Long Island and may not know, that basically Mind Over Matter was a huge inspiration to all of us. And he's always been really a great songwriter and a good sense of pop songs. So I'm sure he was very helpful. I got a question here from Joey. What's the deal with Sarah McLachlan's studio? Wasn't there some connection to Life of a Spectator? I don't know what that means. So
the only thing I could think that would be related to a famous female vocalist would be we mastered at a place called Shelter Island Sound, which is where a ton of amazing people worked. But there was I think it was Suzanne Vega records all over the place.
Okay.
And so we knew it had something to do with her. But yeah, again, another incredible experience. I remember we slept overnight in that studio, and we were listening to records all night on this incredible system and hearing My Bloody Valentine and Elliott Smith and certain things like that for the first time. Just mind-blowing. So these experiences were even beyond what we produced as a band, but they formed you as a person,
All these touch points and things that you're mentioning totally make so many things make sense to me. Just like as an outsider, what I gathered from you guys and what I've talked to with other people. Okay, I don't know if I'm ready to go past Life of a Spectator yet. I'm trying to figure out if I have any other questions because it's such an interesting record to me. What were your favorite songs from that record?
I feel like No Dose is one of my favorite songs. I love playing that song. I just feel like the drums are just different and unique in a way that I just always loved when you could just reinterpret the way the drum set is used and not just use it in the most standard way. And so definitely No Dose, Taming the L Word. And then there were like the ones that just live were just so much fun just because of crowd reaction, like Polar Bear Club, Arthur Trevor, Windows Down. To like close out a night with like Windows Down was just always such a joy.
Yeah, when you guys figured out that that was your ending song, your finale, I think it was just pretty obvious. All right, we can't end our set with anything else now.
Pretty much.
So when you one more question about that album, and then I'll move on. But we've got 30 minutes anyway, so we got some time. Was it hard to like? Did you guys get along pretty well when you would put songs together? Because to me, like, they'd have these songs, and then you would kind of throw it in for a loop, and then play some complicated stuff. Like, was there ever a clash where you had to sort of explain to people what you were trying to do, or was everybody kind of cool and cooperative on the same page?
I would say there was a little bit of a clash. There was always a push and pull between keeping things simple and straightforward and trying to be real spicy, and yeah, so we were 5 very different people from 5 very different musical backgrounds, all pulling in each of our individual ways, and that's what Silent Majority became. That's the sound you got out of that almost battle,
Right.
And so, there was certainly, times where just like, God, do we have to like learn this thing that you came up with? Like, can't we just play some straight thing? In hindsight, I'm just like, God, why didn't I just do more like just straight, punk beats? But I remember just remember thinking about people like you and or myself out in the audience, and how much drums and rhythm affected me, and knowing I would be that person for certain people out in that audience. There were so many bands that, like, I couldn't even tell you what the singer ever said. I probably couldn't even remember half the riffs, but just because of that, the drummer, so I know that's not everyone's thing, but I just knew that there was a population of people that would come just for that,
Absolutely. We would watch you warm up and do shit in between songs when Tommy was talking and be like, yo, what the fuck was that? It's like literally like going to drum school watching you do shit.
Thank you.
You guys did a bit of touring at that time, before and after. You never went to Europe though, right? It was all in the States.
Yeah. I mean, we did quite a bit in the States, but I mean, for our level of band for that time, we definitely pushed ourselves pretty far across the country. But yeah, never Europe.
But you went across to the West Coast.
Yes.
Yeah. What was it like touring? Did it get to the point where you found that you did have fans in other places, or was it and was it growing, or was it still really tough and kind of like slumming?
It was definitely a combination of both, but you could see it growing slowly, and it was always a challenge. It was always a labor of love. We were never a band that was showing up to like legions of people, but we had faith that was part of the process. We had heard about the legends of other bands, and like the Henry Rollins get in the van, and just, we believed in that ethos. We believed in the scene. We believed that like it was okay to be paid $5 because it was, you were being invested in other ways than that one moment. So it was going to come back. It was going to come back and not pay for itself in riches and mansions, but in a way that, like, hopefully, like I said at the beginning, we could just have like a sustainable artistic life,
What were some of your favorite bands that you got to tour with, that you were friends with back then?
Well, I loved the guys in Indecision. That was always a blast. It was always fun to hang out with them and be around with them. Millhouse and all those guys. Trying to think. I always loved seeing Tommy from the Enkindles and going down to Louisville and playing with those guys. There's a lot of bands that we just kind of see on the road and encounter every once in a while, and they became just like that. Oh, this is great. We get to encounter them again. But I think I think we could have done a better job being like a little brother band and kind of playing under other bigger bands. And we spent a lot of time, I feel like, almost like headlining and bringing other bands around with us when we had very little business doing that at that time.
Well, it was a time that I don't think many of us, I mean, you guys were a little older. I don't think anyone really knew like much about how shit worked. It was like figuring stuff out. And mainly nobody, this is a transition to where I'm going here. Nobody from our scene was necessarily famous or like at a level. I think VOD was the first band to get, famous is a weird word, but like they were on like fucking like Ozfest.
Roadrunner, yeah.
Yeah, and like Phil and Salma was singing on their records. Like, so like at that point before that, nobody really knew, or and not only did no one know, I don't think anyone was trying. Is it weird? Here's where I'm going here. I'm sure you must be aware that there are bigger bands that have been inspired by you. Obviously, from our scene, Taking Back Sunday, Brand New, Glassjaw are more peers, and even Movie Life. I'm sure there's more. Is it ever weird to you when you like look at how big things got, knowing that you had a lot to do with that, or do you not really think about that too much?
I'd say I don't really think about it too much, but if I do, I think it's just fantastic. I think it's just so awesome, and for any little bit of that and positivity and hopefully some like decent music getting onto the airwaves, and then inspiring some kid to look a little deeper into where that music came from. Not necessarily that'll get them to Silent Majority, but maybe that'll get them to other great music. That's how it happens to everyone. It's just all kind of different levels. There's like, you know, the Green Day effect of like getting deeper and deeper into punk. You know, you start with something like that you hear on the radio, but and with you can't knock that, because without that, how would you ever get there?
Right. Something I should mention that I think you guys unintentionally taught a lot of us. I mean, I can only speak for myself and the people I know that I rolled with, but there was obviously the music, there was the storytelling and the messages and the way that you guys did that, but it was also like a humbleness. You were Long Island's band. You never really tried to go elsewhere. I don't think you guys ever seemed bitter that you didn't get to another point, because you didn't try, and you were trying to in the first place. And there's something about the whole band's character collectively that is so humble and inspiring and just down to earth. It kind of makes you like look at things differently, because there was a time in Long Island when things got really weird and people were just trying to become famous from the hardcore scene. Such a strange thing.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Well, so let's go into. I know we should talk a little bit about post silent majority stuff, but you eventually broke up. If you don't want to get into the details, that's cool. But like, do you want to give a summary of like what happened there? Why did the band stop?
Yeah. So, you know, in a lot of ways, I wish we had never even really considered it a breakup. I mean, in hindsight, and I've heard this from a lot of bands, and I feel like Fugazi is a great example. But like, what is the need to break up per se? What is the need to make it some final thing? I mean, just to explain, clarify, there was no sort of ill will. All of us still loved each other. But we just came to an impasse where it was like, what's the next step? And how can we get that there the fastest possible? And will that be with this band, or will this be in some other form? And for me, I at that point was saying, music is my life. It still is my life. It will always be my life. I just may have to do other things a little more. But I was like, I'm going to do this full time. And the contract that we had with Initial had us for like a few records, and at the clip we were writing songs and recording them and getting them out and just managing daily lives at the same time. I was like, this is going to take years upon years upon years, and it just came to a point where it's like, let me see if there's some way for us to just branch out and just move faster and get to that goal that I wanted. So so that I have been so pleased to have the opportunity to reunite again. I would love to do it again. In my mind, this is my band still, and it will always be my band. And we're still like a living entity. It just, we just have other things going on.
It's a fantastic thing to hear. I would love to see it again, and it's a good attitude to have too. Do you still keep in touch with the members of Silent Majority much these days?
Not often, but we find ways to connect every once in a while, either because something will come up with the band, like just some little like Spotify message or something, and we'll get to like chatting. Ryan has been one of my closest friends since I joined the band. So we keep in touch here and there. We've actually been trying to do some musical collaborations lately. So yeah, we stay connected here and there, but myself and Ryan mostly.
Let me take I got some questions that people have been asking, and we only have 15 minutes before we get kicked off, because it's like got basically like a timer on the thing. So I'll take some of the questions real quick, and then I'll go to some of mine. But what snare drum did you use in the Silent Majority days?
I had a custom wood snare made by a guy that I met, and I believe it was a 12-inch by 6-inch maple something. I don't know, but it was a
tiny one.
I will have to say, just to like reference to things of those days and things that people may know. God, what was the band? Bloodlet. The guy had like a 5-inch snare. And I just thought it was the coolest thing ever. And I just did not understand any of the impracticality of a tiny snare like that, or a sound like that even. Because especially with hardcore music, I mean, even just I'm being asked right now about whether it was a piccolo, and just the pervasiveness of the piccolo snare, I feel like is a misinformed choice for a very loud, thick, you know, music that you want to cut through. You want more dynamics in the snare, not just this tiny little but. So, yeah.
That was such a 90s sound too. It's like it seemed normal at the time, but when you listen to it now, you're like, Jesus Christ, what's going on here? Somebody wanted to ask, Conrad wanted to know, did you book the Converge Silent Majority show in Seacliff? That was at your house.
Yeah. So I booked shows for a period of time at my church, a Unitarian Universalist church, which, I don't know, did you guys ever play there?
That was by my house. I was raised around that. You're talking about the on Shelter Rock Road.
Yeah. So Silent Majority played their last show there. I mean, I just had a certain point just seeing all these venues around my scene and showing up at this place every once in a while. I was like, why can't I just book a show here? So we had a few great shows, and I booked Converge. And Silent Majority was supposed to play. You can't use the venue. Like, this can't happen. It was like 3 days before, and my parents were going away that weekend, and I literally took every single thing out of our garage, made a little show venue space, and Converged and Piebald and ourselves played in my garage, and they all showered in my shower, and it was really bizarre.
The shows were so diverse then. What was the band that you played in with Ryan in Albany?
Oh, well, we went to school at Binghamton, and we had a band called Heartstring Songs. Shout out to Bob English from Tetsuo and other bands. He was in that, and our good friend Tim O'Shaughnessy. So yeah, that was a fun project. And you know, that was our time to like really just explore all these things we really couldn't with Silent Majority. And we were writing these 10-minute, you know, meandering instrumental songs, and it was fun. It was great.
How did you, Conrad is asking, how did you end up playing with Will Oldham?
Oh,
I didn't know that. I mean, that's crazy.
Yeah, so basically, this relates back to the hardcore scene. It all kind of starts back then, and I had two best friends, Justin Vogt and Ariel Telford from Glassjaw, and we had a zine together. We would interview our favorite bands. We had an interview with Shudder to Think and the Warped Weeble Wobbles and VOD. So anywhere from like your local people that are our friends to like our heroes. And one of those people was Will Oldham. And my friend Justin did the interview, and he's an incredibly smart kid, and Will really took a liking to him, and they kind of kept in touch over the years. And through that communication, Justin would share projects Justin was working on, like our band called Cicada Songs. Will was doing a tour with Godspeed You Black Emperor and playing Bowery Ballroom. And that night, my friend Justin was selling merch. He was like, hey, Will's over at the bar. Why don't you go say hi? And I exchanged like 2 sentences within me. It's just like, I'll be in touch. You know, we're going to talk. You know, like, we're going to play. And I was like, okay. And like a day or two later, I had an email saying, play with this guy, Matt Sweeney, who's the guitarist from Chavez. And these are all like...
weird, by the way, because I jammed with him too.
Oh, amazing. I want to hear about that. But yeah, I mean, these were all idols and like people I was listening to and just like, oh my God, I'm going to get to play with these people. And so I jammed out with Matt Sweeney. That night I came home and I got basically 6 weeks worth of European tour dates emailed to me without ever playing with Will at all, just kind of based on hearing some recordings and the word of Sweeney. And then before that even happened, Dave Pajo from Slint and Papa M, and Slint was one of my favorite bands in the entire world. I just felt like they were my band, and all of a sudden, you know, he's like, you know, can you come play this show with me at Tonic in the city? So I played a solo show with him, and so that was an incredible experience. And the next thing I know, I'm in Europe, and he's in the band, Sweeney's in the band, and
really?
Yeah, and when we came back from that, pretty much immediately after those tours, Zwan was formed, the Billy Corrigan project, with basically Sweeney, Chavez, Sweeney, Pajo, Paz, I forget her last name, that bassist, and so it was an amazing time. It was, I felt so fortunate to have the opportunity. It taught me so much about music and about just personal interactions and people. But yeah, I mean, going from playing as loud as I possibly could all the time, constantly trying to compete with giant amps to
talked about that, yeah.
to this small little clubs one night to giant clubs the next night, trying to reinterpret your sound every night, like, ooh, maybe I should do this sound with like brushes this night, or the next night do it with mallets to kind of fit the vibe, and just holding back, learning about like 4 on the floor, and this. It's
so weird when you go from being a drummer in the hardcore scene to not the hardcore scene, and we've talked about that on and off, air or whatever you want to call it. But that's crazy. I want to stick to you because we have 10 minutes left. But I just really quick, like, it's so weird that you ended up jamming with Matt Sweeney, because I was friends with Mark Ryan from Supertouch, and he, at the time before he was sober, I think he was just like up all night, like doing blow or whatever, like drinking at Motor City, like Sweeney and the singer from Unsane and a bunch of people, and they went into a studio and like he was a drummer and they went to record and jam, and it was all these guys all fucked up and they hadn't slept yet. So funny.
That's awesome.
That's amazing. What else did you go on to do musically after Silent Majority?
So, I mean, pretty much I've always had a band or two since I was 16. Like, I just never stopped playing. So whether they're active or recording or touring, that's a different story, but it's always a big part of my life. So, I had the project with Will and Bonnie Prince Billy, came back from that, did a bunch of playing with a few friends in a band at first we were called Baby Teeth, and then Free Republic of Soul.
Yeah, I remember that. So with John Florencio from Inside.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. God, I love John. And he was someone that in the scene, I was just always like, God, I want to do something with him so bad. So that was really exciting. That also had Bob English from Tetsuo, Mike Treff from Closure, our friend Maddie Messina from Helen of Troy.
I love those guys.
Yeah, that was a great scene. It was a great time. I really feel like we had a ton of potential. And so that was a bit of fun. Played in a band called Airplane Pageant. We played a few fun shows. I'm trying to think. But yeah, more than recently. Sorry, go ahead. More recently, living in New York and just having a practice space, where I could barely get there, I had to come up with, creative outlets. So I got a drum sampler. I got, some various, recording equipment, and have just been trying my best to, just keep the creative process going. So it doesn't matter if it's on an acoustic drum or it's on a table or it's on a garbage can or whatever. I'm going to record it and make songs out of it. So right now, since this whole quarantine situation, I've been trying to write custom, personalized, fully fleshed out songs on drums to give to collaborators, and basically just be like sort of like a coloring book. I'm going to give you the lines to color in and just go for it. So,
dude, if you can send me shit, I'm recording guitar right now.
And I was thinking about that because seeing you playing guitar recently reminded me, and I was like, you would be perfect for this. So just hoping to get.
Let's do it.
Absolutely, we'll make this happen. But I can't forget, and this was such an incredible experience. The band Savak that I got the opportunity to play with for a while. I was teaching in Brooklyn, and I had this really incredibly kind and smart student, and I would see the dad every day, and eventually, I was like, this guy looks like someone that I would have something in common with, and I learned eventually he was in this band called Edsel, and I had records of theirs. They were a DC
really
band.
Yeah.
And I was like, let's jam. And the next thing I know, we start jamming. That's just been my policy my whole life. The second I learn someone's a musician, I don't care what style they're into. I don't care what their level of proficiency. I'm just like, let's jam. Let's get down.
Dude,
And
I saw that band twice thinking you were going to be on drums, opening for Hot Snakes, and I was so bummed. They were great, but I was like, where the fuck is Ben?
yeah, yeah. So over time, as I had my first baby and started moving toward moving to Chicago, the band became more of a collective, and they had the drummer from Holy Fuck and various other bands, and the drummer from he's in Girls Against Boys, Alex.
Yeah, fucking legendary.
Filling in here and there, but yeah, yes, that was so Rob answering the question there.
Before we get off that tip, and I still have like 2 or 3 more, and I have 5 minutes left to do it, so I apologize. We have to breathe, but are there recordings of any of the bands that you just mentioned post Silent Majority on Spotify or on streaming that we could go back and check out? I feel like we might have missed stuff.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I will say that's on Bandcamp, a project that I've been, so it's basically an album that I did a collaboration with one of my closest friends, Mauricio Sanchez, and we have about 10 songs online that we are hoping to re-release and do something a little more formal with, but that band is called Lenguas.
Okay, how do you spell that?
Lenguas.
I'm going to look that up as soon as it's over and check that out.
And we have 4 EPs, so there's like EP 1, 2, 3, 4. So just, yeah, check those out.
All right, I got 2 pretty deep questions after this, so I know this is a tough one to answer quickly, but what's your fondest memory of Silent Majority?
Fondest moment or fondest memory? I mean, a lot of it was I would say in some ways the recording of You Would Love to Know was a really, just amazing period of time. It was like summertime. The studio was like 10 minutes from my house. We would just like roll back and forth and hang out, record. And the studio itself was just beautiful. I felt so blessed to be in this space. I mean, that was a really incredible moment. And just playing wise, I do remember there was this one Sick of It All show at the PWAC that just was to see that crowd of people and to feel that kind of love was just absolutely incredible, and just showed me there was a lot of, at least for me, insecurity in this band. It's like, are we good? Is this something good? And it was just so affirming to see people's reactions, and that's basically that was my compass, so if people seem to like it, like half the time it was not something that I wanted, or I was like, I'm going to do this, and then I had that outcome. I had to trust how other people felt, and people always made me feel so good about it that I had to trust that.
Well, yes, as you should. It's amazing. I got like 2.5 minutes on the clock, so this is going to be like a game show. Top 5 Long Island hardcore records, go.
Auto Manipulation by Minor Matter. God. Garden Variety, Knocking the Skill Level.
Long Island band, Garden Variety. All right, go ahead. Sorry.
52X. I feel like I just got to say something about the 52X and loving them.
Yeah, 2 more.
The VOD demo. I mean, that blew my mind. That absolutely just killed me. And I know I'm forgetting things. Just definitely Glassjaw. I have to shout. I mean,
Glassjaw, yeah.
They're just incredible.
Okay, last question. If we are stuck in the quarantine and we have 5 records that we can keep, what are they? You have 2 minutes, a little less than 2 minutes.
How many records?
5.
5 records. Interesting. Hoover, The Lure, Traversal, Route 7. June of 44, Tropics and Meridians. Elliott Smith, Either Or. I'm so not good at this on the spot stuff. Shudder to Think, Pony Express record. What am I up to? 4?
I got 57 seconds left.
God. Let's see. De La Soul Stakes is High. Yeah, Jawbox. I mean, God, I just felt like that's so obvious.
All right, before we get kicked off, because I see a timer in front of me that you don't see, I want to thank you so much. You're the best. I love you. You are the greatest Long Island hardcore drummer of all time, and Silent Majority was the greatest Long Island hardcore band of all time. And I'm so happy and lucky that I get to call you a friend. So thank you so much. And let's talk really soon.
Thank you, Chris. I am so honored. Thank you so much for taking the time to ask me these questions. You are the man. And yeah, let's catch up soon.
Fuck yeah, brother. Stay safe out there. And
Much love.
Send me some drums, all right?
I will. You're on the list, no doubt.
All right. Peace out, brother.
All right. Peace.
Thanks for watching, everybody. And stay safe.